There you go. All right, everybody, it's the AT Town Hall. There it is. Welcome. Hello. Hello. I do have a plan. I'll tell you my plan, and then people see if they want to get on board with this plan. It felt like a nice opportunity in these town halls to build on some of the conversations from the unconference. So that was my thought. So I randomly took 4 topics, and I thought we could break out. I don't know how many of us we are. We're kind of a small group right now. We're only 10. But we could certainly do that. I thought we would chat first. We always chat first. We haven't been together in a while. It's been a handful of weeks. Anything people want to share? How about that? We'll start with that, and then we'll work towards the plan if we decide to go there. Good things, comment, things you're working on, things that were positive, things that you struggle.
I think I still have an ATIA hangover.
I just said that before you popped on. I said, I didn't do a thing over the weekend because I really was annoyed by looking at my computer again. It had gotten me to that point. I was like, I'm not interested. I don't want to sit in that room. I don't want to sit in that chair.
I have a little eye twitch going on still.
Right? You just kind of twitchy.
Yeah.
That's not to say it wasn't great. It was great.
No, for good reason I haven't. But I kept thinking, I have a couple sessions. I want to go back, and I'm like, nope, not doing it this weekend.
Yeah.
Can't do it.
I thought the same thing.
Can't do it.
I need to get into those recordings. And then I did the same thing. I'm like, well, not now. I don't need to get into them. Maybe another day or like another week. Anybody else? Did anybody else go and have some thoughts on how it was? I was curious what people think.
So, I mean, we've had mixed results. We certainly got a lot more training this year than we ever have in the past, right? So all the lesson picks folks, well, Beth and Lori were the attendees and actually got lots of CEUs, which they never do.
Yeah.
They got to see everybody. I think, from a vendor perspective, this format didn't work at all, right? I mean, did any of you, out of curiosity, did any of you spend any time with any vendors at ATIA?
One.
Was it me?
Well, I mean, if you don't count Lesson Picks Live, then no. I mean, but my struggle was I had time on afternoons, and it never jived with the time that the vendors were actually available, but I didn't know that until the day of.
Right. Yeah. We actually had somebody manning the booth every minute that it was available because of that problem. Now we had them doing their job and working tickets with a Zoom thing up next to them, right?
Yeah.
But we had somebody in there all the time, and I think we had about 10 or 11 people over the entire. And we have, listen, that booth at ATIA is fantastic for us because we're right there by the registration. We see hundreds of people, and they're all decision makers, and it's always been really good for us from a commercial standpoint. And I don't want to pick on ATIA for this. I'll pick on them for other stuff, but none of the conferences who have gone virtual have figured out a way to actually involve the vendors at all. Yeah. Not effectively. I don't think we've been to one conference where it has worked well.
Don't you think, Bill, there's a component of that that has to do with this actual virtual platform itself? Is at the core of that issue? I imagine, think about it, if we're at the booth at ATIA and you're there and Lori's there and Beth is there and 3 of us from this group walk up, we could have 3 separate concurrent conversations going on.
Yeah.
And it would and then sometimes those naturally draw other people in. And I think this whole idea of virtual is, look, even now, it's only one person talking at a time, and everybody else, I hope you want to talk about this because that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I was going to say the bigger thing is that when you do ATIA in person, you allocate 5 days of your life, and you go and you're in ATIA for 5 days of your life, or 6 if you stay for Saturday, whatever, right? You take this chunk, and it's the entire day. So if you get up at 7 and you're at the hall at 7:30 and you leave at 10 o'clock at night, you've been at ATIA for 14, 15 hours that day. And when you're at ATIA virtual, you've allocated, even if you do 6 sessions, right? You've allocated 6 individual slices. and all of the in-betweens between all those sessions are given to your wife or your husband or your kids or whatever else is going on. And I think all that middle time is where the vendors live, and it's just totally not there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. Because that's when
I don't know how to fix it.
Yeah, I don't know how to fix it either, because that's when
Get
I
rid of the
think it
virus.
moves
Let's get back
into-
together.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I squeeze it into those moments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi,
And it's
everyone.
tricky.
I just want to chime in and say, as compared to closing the gap, which was 2 weeks and you had to watch it all, I found ATIA's like 6-month periods such a relief. And I hope to, check into those recordings when I have the capacity, but that compressed schedule I found really difficult. So as far as virtual conferences go, I just thought that was one thing ATI had going for it.
Well, but even though those live sessions, I found we got permission to kind of block out some time, but that was next to impossible because I was still in my office with people, asking for something or doing something. So even sessions that I really, really wanted to tune in on, I know I missed pieces of because there was no way to really completely, like Bill was saying, like dive in and be present 100% to ATIA.
Yeah, that definitely goes back to Bill's point, is that idea is that you're at ATIA, you're at ATIA.
Yeah, I think
This year I
only-
was here in this room, which meant I could have done 400 other things.
Yeah,
And then you start to weigh, oh, should I listen to that? Or should I just do that email and that other thing that's due?
Yeah, I think the only sessions I was fully actively present in were the 2 that I presented at. Because everything else I was doing a report or email or helping somebody with an iPad all at the same time while trying to be present. And
Yeah, it is. It's interesting. It's just
It
different.
helped to be a moderator because I knew that at least on 2 of the days I was going to be full time, like full on,
Mhm.
just like I was there. Being the
Yeah.
moderator to different sessions. And I think that really helped. Mike, you did more rooms than I did.
Yeah, I did. But it was interesting, Kel. I agree with you. Being a moderator or a host forced you to be there the whole time. But because I was a host of a single room, it forced me to be in that room the whole time. And there were moments where I was like, oh, look what's happening right now. And I'm like, and I don't think I had the mental bandwidth to open another computer and watch that one at the same time. And so there was this kind of push and pull of, I think I probably listened to more full sessions than I ever had. And I think part of that is the fact that it was virtual and it wasn't, I always talk about the hallway. The hallway is a double-edged sword at ATIA. It's great because it's great for meeting people and having conversations, but it's bad because you're meeting people and you're having conversations and then you're missing something else. And I think in the live conference, rarely do I walk into a session exactly on time and stay the whole entire 60 minutes. More, it's like 5 minutes late. I bail out 5 minutes early, 10 minutes early, 15 minutes early, whatever it might be. And I couldn't do that because I was physically tied to that one room. And so while it did force me into sessions, it forced me into sessions, he says, cryptically.
Well, it forced me into sessions probably of people that I might not have chosen. And I was very delighted with some of those folks. I really was. I mean, it would have been a topic I probably would not have picked, but I ended up there. I'm like, okay, let's go for it. And yeah, I'm pleased with the mixed format. Like Amy said, closing the gap was a horror. I mean, it just was really hard in those 2 weeks. And I'd be trying to I'm contacting people from other states. They're like, I'm watching Closing the Gap until it goes off tomorrow. It's like, so I think I ended up watching 10 sessions. And that's certainly not worth the price of admission.
Yeah. And
now, it looks like they're going to change it for next year.
Okay. Were all the sessions recorded at Closing the Gap?
Except for pre-conference.
Okay. All right.
And then they had 3 days that you could meet people live. So they had all the presenters had a chance to have an hour conference room. I was the first person, one of the first 5 on the first day. And I was up against Karen Erickson. And so that's where everybody was. Like there was nobody. I had like 3 people come in and chat and we talked about like, what have you been doing during COVID? So.
The other big problem with that, and I think I'm just reporting what Beth has told me here, but problem with that on Closing the Gap was that all of those meet the speaker sessions were at the end.
Yeah.
So there was no opportunity to talk about what did you see that I need to, what were the best sessions you were at? They could tell you, but then you had no time to go actually do them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Right.
good point, right? And it's
That's
a timing
true.
thing, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, and I had this conversation with multiple people already. I had it with Alyssa, and I think I talked to Rachel about this a little bit, and even Murph. The chats were so good during the sessions. They were so good. And if you if you could have managed the two kind of box experience, which some of us can and some of us can't, you were getting a whole second session in that chat. That was really good.
It just showed how eager people were to connect in the chat.
Yeah, right. I agree, Amy. Yeah,
Yeah.
it really gave a sense of that community. And from what I hear from Closing the Gap, that's part of a missed opportunity there, right? When everything's recorded, you're all just kind of watching it on your own, and you're hoping that someone comes to your presenter session to just chat about it. Fingers crossed that someone comes. But if they don't, it feels like it's like a missed learning opportunity there.
I think that's a perk too I mean, I think in person is always better, but you know, the perk of having it online is that chat piece of it, because
Yeah.
a lot of times when you do attend in person, you sit, you take it in, you know, maybe you might ask questions, or what you always see people do is at the end, they go up to the presenter and then ask their questions privately because they don't feel comfortable. Whereas like
Right.
that chat feature kind of creates a safe environment for people to feel like, oh yeah, I can share and I can participate, you know, and I can ask those questions without feeling like I'm interrupting somebody speaking. So I feel like, I don't know if there's a way to like have that incorporated if, you know, these conferences, and hopefully they do, but they go back live. I wonder if there's a way to incorporate that component where even if you have something like a Padlet or whatever it is, like behind, that people can post those questions
Right.
while the person's presenting and still.
Yeah, we
kinda
talked
create
about
that-
AAC in the cloud uses Slack as a back channel for their
Mhm.
entire conference, and I don't see why it couldn't work in a scenario like this. Like even if ATIA decides not to do it, that we couldn't do it without them. AOTA, our OT conference, is doing something a little weird, and I'm still trying to figure out how it's going to work as a presenter. But we are recording our session. They're playing our recorded session back, and we're available in the chat when it's being played back for live questions. And as
I've
a
done that.
presenter, yeah, as a presenter,
It's strange.
it's weird feeling like I'm going to be listening to myself presenting and answering questions and hearing every error I make and every stumble I make in conversation. So I may just, Beth and I are presenting together, and I may just say, Beth, you talk a lot. I'll show things. I'll be Vanna White so that I don't get self-conscious about hearing myself played back. I know what they were trying to do.
Yeah.
But I don't know that that's going to be any better than what happened at ATIA.
So
I did
You
that
can get conversation going that way, because it's happened to me twice now with Logan Tech, where I recorded and then I was there live while the recording was playing. And the first time it was just very strange, and all I did was fix everything that I said. So I just used the chat like mad and said,
What
go
I
to
meant
this
was-
website, do
yeah.
this, do that. But then the second time I did it, I was able to pose, like in the presentation, I would suggest something.
Yes.
So I tried to get the conversation going with people during it. And that second time that I handled it that way seemed a lot better.
and
Yeah,
and that's
I had
how
And
I
it was
did it too.
short. It was only 30 minutes.
And that's how I did it too at a session. I had a session where they'd asked me to fill in for somebody, but I wasn't available to do it live. So I recorded it, but I purposely dropped questions and breaks in there. And I was in a meeting watching the Padlet at the same time. And I knew when those question breaks came, and I just was answering people without watching it. I just had a list of when those were going to happen. And I was in this meeting doing it. And the best compliment I got from the host, who was in the room to make sure my recording kept playing, is he said that there were a handful of people that really liked the opportunity to talk to me in person during the session. And they didn't even realize it was recorded. And I was like, oh, well, that's kind of probably the best thing you could say, right? Because it had just kind of a natural, it just kind of, and I think there was even a point where I said to them, how many of you are classroom teachers? And then I waited like a second. I'm like, all right, well, I can't see all your hands anyway, so I'm just going to assume that a bunch of you are. And he was like, oh, that was so funny when that happened,
Totally
because
funny.
they thought you were in person. And I'm not just kind of making it up as we go, but there is opportunity there to have people kind of drawn in. Sorry, Bill, I talked over you. Go ahead.
It's okay. You actually hit my point, which is, Alyssa, you should just turn your sound down. That's what I did when I had that problem, because then you can see where you are in the you know your presentation and you know where you are, but if you have to listen to yourself, you can't think. So just turn it down.
Yeah,
That
I think
makes
that's
a
an
lot of
awesome
sense.
way to do it, right? Yeah, so I think
Makes a
there's
lot
a
of
whole lot of opportunities that they could do. I'm curious what the ATIA people take from the conference this time and what continues to live going forward. Um, I shared with them our AT chat from last week, and I said, hey, we had a whole hour-long conversation about the conference. You might want to go through it and look and see what we were talking about. For that matter, I'll share this link with them too. Say, you guys should watch this. Now everybody's going to stop talking, but that's okay. But that idea of, what people experienced, because I think this idea of recording sessions and then following up several days later, to me, loses the whole point. I know last year I presented at the UDL IRN and I did a recorded session with this same fear of, well, how am I going to connect with people during it? And so what we did was we made a Padlet with a bunch of questions on it, referenced it throughout the recording, and said to people, we know you're watching this as a recording. We are watching the Padlet throughout the week. Leave comments and we will have a conversation with you, because they didn't have any kind of structure to have you talk to people live. And so we tried to kind of create that in some way. And I'll have to tell you, for as much energy as we put into it, we didn't have anybody respond back on the Padlet. And so there's, there's that, to me, a missed opportunity. I mean, it's, you're yelling into the void, but is anybody listening?
You really got to see with the live sessions at ATIA people's learning style. Where some people would follow along with the posted handout. Other people wanted to have like every link put into the chat.
Yeah.
I had, when we were on the quiet call, I was monitoring the quiet presentation rather than being one of the presenters. And I was putting things into chat, and then I was getting told by the presenters, that's in the handout. I'm like, yes, but not everybody does it that way.
Yeah. And there is a component.
I was interested in seeing like how people were sharing, and I know what I was doing when I was watching, I was linking right away to things that I could get to. And I had like 1,000,
exactly,
tabs open.
I think if people remember that you don't, even if someone's sharing their screen, you don't have to do full screen on your side. If a link goes in the chat, click it, open it and explore, and then you have two screens open at the same time. And so I think there is this kind of, even still, a bit of a learning curve with people and their comfort level with tech. And I mean people, participants and presenters, because now I had that flip side as being the host, that I saw a very interesting side to presenters who were still not very comfortable managing a virtual experience. And they approached it as they would have if they were live. And that didn't translate all the time.
Something that really helped me with my session was having my friends in the session and in the chat. Like Beth was just dropping every link into the chat. I know Alyssa was in there like chiming in with things, and I was very overwhelmed with how to do my lesson picks giveaway. And so I like texted my friend 5 minutes before, and I was like, if I ask for birth dates, will you find the ones that are closest to my kids? So that's how I decide. So then she's texting me on the side. So that really helped me manage things, was to have like my friends there.
And that's a great strategy, right? And I think enough people were floating around that, you could do things like that. And it's interesting, in a virtual presentation, you really appreciate the idea of presenting with someone else. Like we did one of the sessions I did was me and Chris and Beth and Karen. And then there was almost zero panic because there were 3 other people that weren't talking at the time who were managing other stuff, which I think was really helpful.
Yeah, I was glad I showed some videos too. So then once the video played, I went in and like answered in the chat too. So that I think was something I'll try to do in the future too.
Yeah.
Kara,
think
I
it's
wanted
really-
to comment on your session at Closing the Gap, but you may have also presented at ATIA and I haven't caught it yet, but
Yeah.
at Closing the Gap, your combination of recordings and other content was so on point.
Oh,
That-
good. Thank you for that feedback. Yeah,
That's
that was Lauren Enders and I, right? Did that
Yeah.
one. Yes. And so the good thing, the reason we did that too was we put anything that was like more detailed of like how to do this in PowerPoint. We made a video and had that in the slides so then you could rewatch. So I'm glad that was helpful.
Yeah. And I think those are good strategies, Sarah. That idea of dropping in different kinds of material into an hour long so that it gives you a catch up moment.
Yeah.
It gives you a chance to turn your mic off and catch your breath for a second and just kind of think about, all right, is this going the way I thought or is it completely off the tracks? And do I need to regroup? And I think those kind of moments help.
I think
Yeah.
every other sentence in our social media presentation was going off the tracks. That's the joy of presenting with Mia Lodato.
That
I
social
second
media.
that.
session
I
was-
second that. I second that. I second that.
Oh, it was
You
great.
You know my joy, Hillary.
I do firsthand, and I love every minute of it.
I was going to say it went off the rails in the best possible way. It was perfect.
And I had that juxtaposition of a session with Judy Scootover, who is methodical, and a session with Mia, who's a complete opposite presenter. And I have to be better about adjusting my co-presenter style in those moments to, like, for Mia, be like the grounding force and be like, okay, Mia, come back to earth. And for Judy, be like moving forward. So I think it's very interesting as a presenter, and I mean, I feel a young presenter to be learning some of those ins and outs. And I don't know that it would be as magnified if we were in person, because I've presented with people in person before and I don't think it was the same.
I can't stand presenting with people in person. I can't
Really?
stand it. It drives me absolutely berserk because they always step on my lines and do things outside that I'm planning on doing, and it's just never okay.
I
You
feel like
haven't
was
presented
talking
with
about me.
somebody steady. So you
I've
get
been-
somebody where
I've
you know
presented
what
with
they're going to
my
say and
wife.
you set each other up.
No,
gonna
I
say,
presented
so-
with my wife. It caused more trouble than it was ever worth.
Mental note, I will never be presenting with Bill Binko in person.
Just
That's
a nice
what I-
probably true.
observation.
It's a-
I've
Listen,
presented
you were on
with
my-
Bill.
You were on the Lesson Picks Live this week. It's different when I'm kind of playing the host and letting other people talk. But if I'm presenting a topic, y'all get out of the way. Just sit down and shut up. And you can't say that to your wife.
Now,
I
I'm
mean,
trying
you
to,
could.
now I'm trying to think back to the session Bill and I presented and how badly I stepped all over all his stuff.
So
That's
you
unfortunate.
You'll never know.
You're the hardest to present with because you did zero prep. And I mean less than zero prep on that presentation.
And yet it
And
probably
yet it went
worked
very
out.
well.
And it
It-
probably worked out. So there you go. And I there's a good life lesson there because I've prepped for today's thing with extra slides and we haven't even gotten to them. So why bother to prep? Look, there's no.
You're just reinforcing Mike's no prep. This is
I
a
was
problem.
just going to say that, Elise.
Hey, you know, that could be Mike's next session. No prep, no problem.
No prep, no problem.
Mike's like,
No prep, no
doesn't
problem.
study, right,
Questions on the
exactly.
fly.
I'm
Mike,
putting
you
that
can-
out there. I will present that with any of you except Bill. Any of you.
I'm in. I think that would be hilarious.
Okay, we're ready to go. We can present this tomorrow. Let's go.
So what?
When I worked at the
No prep, no
Pennsylvania,
problem.
when I worked at the Pennsylvania Device Center, like the first name of that project, we had a coworker, and Irene can talk to this too, Kristen Swangle. And Kristen swore that she could put, and now this is a long time ago, you guys were just in diapers where, you know, we were using transparencies. But Kristen swore that she could pick 10 transparencies, any of them, and do any technology session ever.
Fun.
Just to use the same 10 slides and she could change the topic.
Oh my God, I think that's great. I think that is great. I think it is interesting watching people approach this. And being in that one room all of the 2 weeks gave me a nice kind of snapshot of the way people do things as far as present. And I agree with what Kelly said. I got to see sessions I guarantee I would not have gone and saw if I was in person. So that was really good because I saw some other things. I was like, oh, that's really interesting. I would have never watched that. It's just not in my wheelhouse of what I do. So that was good. But I also had other experiences of trying to picture what a learner on the other side of the screen wants. And so as a learner from some of those sessions, I had these kind of moments of, do I really want someone to speak at me for 58 of the 60 minutes? Or do I want it to breathe a little bit and give me an opportunity? And so I saw both of those. And in a couple where it was just like, it was non-stop from minute 1 to minute 58. It was just nonstop, one after another, slide after slide after slide, and just a lot of info. And as I'm watching the chat box and I'm thinking, boy, that's unfortunate because there's so much happening in the chat box that's going unanswered right now. And there's so many engaged people desperate for interaction and they're not getting it. And I thought,
and I think the sessions that we were in together, Mike, you and I, you did a really good job of trying to help that presenter add some interactive element and respond to the chat or be present to the chat. But I don't know that you can change a presenter's style who's not super comfortable with that medium.
Yeah.
In the course of a presentation.
No, and you can't. You're right. You're absolutely right. And
you can get close.
You can.
You can try.
And I'm going to now combat the theory that Mike doesn't prep, because Mike does do some prep. It's just different kind of prep. It's not content prep.
Keep going.
I had hit him with with the whole hosting thing and what do I do? Because we had to make sure that every session went to 60 minutes so that everybody could get their CEUs.
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough to talk with Mike the day before it happened to me, where the person that I was the moderator for ended in 25 minutes. And I thought, dear God, like, what am I gonna, and he was somebody that was just pile driving through the slides, very kind of monotone. Every now and then he would give it an example that gave you like a little light into, okay, like this dude does this. But when he ended that early, I was like, oh shit. Like, can't turn this into the Kelly Farr show. This is this man's session. But having the background from Mike, where Mike said, this is what I did. This is what I did. These are the questions I was ready with. These are the things I pulled from chat. And because that presenter had been so just pile driving through, there wasn't a lot of chat at that point to draw from. And so he had his resource list up. And so I just said, tell us a little bit more about these resources that you have here. These look really good. And then he changed. Like, he went out of Mr. Presenter mode into like this dynamic, and then he was reading the chat. And so I think he just had to get through his content till he really turned it on. And by the end, I was having to shut us down because time was up.
And that is a good thing. It's a good story. It does prove the fact that I do prep slightly, which is nice. That was the best part of the story.
Actually, that was wrong, because what you really learned there is that Mike learns from his mistakes and is willing to share. And nobody would ever say that was not true.
How dare you? Well, that was it's so funny because what Kelly said is so true. When we did the discussion about hosting and moderating, they kept driving home the point that if those sessions don't go for 60 minutes, you only get 30 minutes worth of CEUs. Didn't matter if it was 57 minutes, you got 30 minutes. So you went from an hour to 0.5. Yep. And that's pretty significant. And so they kept driving this point home of, well, don't let the sessions end early. And so that had been on my mind for like the past week before the session started. And I had kind of a Kelly moment, a preemptive Kelly moment, like, oh crap, like, what am I going to do if someone just stops? We've all been there when someone's finished 10 minutes early, 15 minutes early. In the live conference, what do? You loiter around for a couple minutes and you go, Right. Or you just go, as Rachel said, you just go. Right. I don't know what Rachel's up to, but
So, and I'm a lot like Cassie said in the chat. I tend to now over prep things in the slides, and I'm up front with people in the very beginning. Look, like there are probably 15 more slides than I'm going to get here, but I would rather you have the resources and I not talk about them than not, because I think then it's like, as I see time expiring, I can go, oh, like that happened in our social media session. We knew we weren't going to get through everything, but we decided it was better to cover all of the possible social media things. Like Mia was adding slides the morning of, like, oh, Clubhouse, let's put that in there. So like trying to kind of balance, here are all the resources we want you to have after this session, knowing 60 minutes is a finite time. And if you plan more than 45 slides, you're out of luck. Like,
yeah. No,
I think
I think it's a good, sorry, Cass, go ahead.
I think that statement at the beginning of a session is so freeing to be able to say, here's my presentation. I know as we start conversing today, I'm going to go faster through some parts, slower through some, depending on what you need, but I don't plan on getting to all of it. So just to be aware, we're not going to race. And then as a presenter, that gives you that freedom. If you have a really quiet group, which I've had, that, I mean, they're just not talking.
Crickets.
And then, you have stuff to keep exploring. But if you've got a chatty group, you can really delve into something without feeling that heavy guilt of, oh my gosh, they were expecting me to go through all of this and I didn't touch it. Yeah. So like, that's my like go-to statement at the start of a session. Like,
well, and the converse is frustrating sometimes, because I've had times where I've presented, I mean, this happened to Matt Press and I in a live session where people complained in the reviews that we didn't go through all the slides. And I was like, I can't win for trying then, because either I like, and people don't get like enough to know what I was really talking about, or on the back end, people are like, why didn't you cover all the content?
Yeah.
Let that go, Eliza. Let's let it go.
Balance.
It was like
I do it almost every session.
Yeah.
It was like 4 years ago, and it still burns me for some.
No, sit with the Disney princesses and let it go.
There you go. So Alyssa, what I have done is at the end of my presentation, if you ever look, like what I actually walk through in my presentations ends with a thank you and goodbye kind of thing. And then there's always, like, if you ever look at the PPT, there's always like 5 more slides, right? And we don't talk through them. And I say that's the goodbye. And sometimes it says bonus material, and then I have them in there just because there's other stuff. I always have other stuff I want to talk about, right? And if you do get done early, you just jump to those. But
yeah, I think that's a good way to go. And always adding that in. I agree. If you, same thing, Bill, you look at mine, and as soon as the thank you slide happens, I put a black slide to remind me that was the end.
That's exactly what I do.
And then I dump extra stuff, but I'll say to people, it's there. You can find it. It's all there.
Because,
if you want to go deeper.
In the Q&A, somebody asks a question and you just need that picture. Yeah. And it's in a different deck, and you don't want to leave PowerPoint and go find the other deck and bring it up, right?
Yeah.
It's also kind of a backward compliment. It says they wanted more from you.
Right.
They didn't think they got enough.
Yeah.
They wanted to keep listening. So it's just another way to do it.
I tried to process it as that, but it's always in the back of my mind now when I plan things. And so that's why I think I went to the disclaimer, like Cassie and I were saying, like at the very beginning, like, I know there's going to be stuff in here, like for those 2 people who were going to like chew me out on an eval, and it'll probably still happen.
I was just going to say,
if that's the worst critique you ever get, you're doing awesome.
Yeah.
I've been called misogynistic and you name it. I get it all.
That was just in this chat today, right?
I mean, that was just in the DMs I just sent to Bill. I mean, that's what I've been doing the whole time. I've been sending that to Bill right now. So yeah. I think I think that person wants to complain anyway.
Yep.
So just take it with what it's given to you as. Keep it in your mind. Let it burn a hole in your soul.
Yeah,
so that's right. Adjust accordingly. And what are you going to do? And some of those things, how can you combat that? Like what Bill said, how do you even combat that? Someone's like, you're misogynistic. I've had comments people like, we don't do things that way here. Okay, I don't even know what that means, but okay, cool. That's fine. Then don't do those things here.
Your answer is, you mean you don't do it right?
That's good. I'll use that. Yeah.
You're wrong.
Was anybody else completely ruined? And I'm trying to think of the name of the conference, and you were there and you were there and you were there, where it was 30 minutes, because as a presenter, I think 30 minutes is really stressful, but as a participant right now, dang man, 30 minutes is like my cat.
Yeah.
It really is. I mean, I might be there 60,
I
but
think
30,
there
I
is,
engage 30 of it.
yeah, I think there is a moment that we've seen this flip to, I like the shorter now. And I would argue, in my mind, I'd rather you gave me 2 30-minute sessions with less content than tried to cram something into 60 minutes.
I agree.
Ruth, yes.
And I'm perfectly fine. I mean, this what we're doing right now is a great example. I would say this has been valuable for me. We've had no plan, that not that part, but just the idea that it was a free sharing of information. We all got something from it, hopefully, and it was valuable for our time, but there was no pressure of, oh, there's 80 slides we need to get through in 45 minutes. Or, you know,
Well, yeah. And I think what
When
you're
Mike was
saying,
at
Paige,
Cal
is
State
like,
Northridge at the live conference, we had a 30-minute session and 60-minute sessions, and it was a nice time slot to get. As a presenter, the 30 minutes is nice because you can try out new material without being totally committed, right? And so I missed that time slot.
I agree.
yeah, it was hard. We did, I think it was the New Hampshire one that we did the 30-minute time slot.
That was it, yeah.
Yeah, and it was definitely, as a presenter, it was definitely a challenge to pair, but it forced me to also take what I was going to present and really look at it. Because when you have like an hour or 90 minutes, you're like, you know what, it's just like a dump. Like, you're like, I can just throw it all in, and then if I don't get to it, so what? And like, it really forced me to kind of look at what I was presenting and be like, what's the most important stuff here that I've really got to get across to everybody?
Yeah.
And then I still did keep extra slides in there. But again, like you guys said, whether they were woven in and I'm like, all right, we've kind of talked about this and we're going to go past it. You know, and and it's funny because I'm an over planner. I know not everybody is, but I am like a type A human being. I know Alyssa's like, yay, me too. And, and so for me, I also like, I plan through my slides like really thoroughly, but then I find when I'm presenting, I don't even use half of them. Like I end up like going live and showing things and veering off. But for me, it gives me like I guess the safety net to know that it's there, that if like the tech doesn't work, I've got a backup, or if something doesn't, like, it just gives me that like security net there. It's hard. Like when you present to a room and it's quiet, like, I don't know, for me, that's like I just did a local presentation for my own district where I did a training for like all SLPs, resource room, like special ed teachers, like everybody. And it was like, there were a few questions here and there, and these are all people I know. And it was like crickets. And I was like, God, and I did it with one of my coworkers, and I was like, did that just like totally bomb? Did everyone like hate it after? But then the funny thing is the amount of like emails and texts I got after, and people were like, that was awesome. That was the most meaningful PD we've had in forever. Like, and I was like, all right, so the silence isn't like necessarily a negative. It's just maybe that I've given them more than enough and they don't really have questions, or they just don't want to ask questions, you know? So I was like, all right, I got to learn to like take that as like a takeaway from these presentations, that like the quiet isn't necessarily a negative. Like
that's so much easier in person because you can read it. You can read, oh, they're all in it. I've got like when I was with Mike's thing in New Jersey, right? I gave the keynote there. Everybody was silent because I was showing Ella and they were totally in it. And online, you totally can't tell.
Right.
Like you can't tell if they're in it or if it's just they've got you over here on the side and they're sending emails, you know?
Yeah.
Right.
And that's the struggle. I think there's those two things. And going back to Kelly's idea of 30 minutes, when I spoke to David and Caroline after the conference the other day, and one of my comments was, I really wish you'd consider doing 30-minute sessions. I think some of your presenters would be awesome as 30 minutes, but they're not good at 60. So I think you need to find some way to accommodate both.
Doing some lightning round, 30-minute sessions, 60-minute sessions, 90-minute sessions. Because I feel like there are topics that lend themselves really well to 90 minutes where you can like take a deep dive, and those people come prepared to take a deep dive. But in a 30 or 60-minute session, you get that mix of people who like just want to kind of get their hour CEU. And then there are people who are ready for more than what that 60-minute session is. I feel like 60 minutes is almost harder than 30 or 90.
Yeah, I mean, it could be, but for some people, if you told them they only had to go for 30 minutes, it would drop the weight off their shoulders, and it might be really good. And then they'd have that opportunity, like Kelly said, to try out new stuff or just try presenting, period. How many
You could
times
also,
do you see people at a live conference who say, oh, I could never stand up there for an hour, and then they'll follow that up with, oh, but I could stand up there for like 20 minutes. Well, then why didn't we have something like that? And maybe it's like Alyssa said, it's a hot topics or whatever you want to call it, so that you can package it into one session. Package 1 hour session is 3 20-minute sessions, whatever. And let
Yeah, I've
people
done that at
go.
ATIA where I've gotten groups of people together. So people that were like, I've heard them, I
Mhm.
know they've got good stuff, but they're scared to death to do an hour. And I'll just say, okay, we're going to do an hour on implementing AC in the classroom. And everybody's got 10 minutes.
Right,
You
exactly.
know, and then I always put myself at the end because I'm willing to sacrifice my information to let those 4 go.
Right.
And every time I've done that at ATIA, those people have turned around the next year and done their own presentation.
Yes, which has been awesome. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Irene.
thank you. I also think it works better for the learner because it follows adult learning theory, and it follows implementation theory if you can do it. So instead of one 30-minute session, you might have multiple 30-minute sessions across time. So there's all that processing that people can do in between and review and then come back to it. So you can actually get deeper in the 30 minutes than you can in the 90 because they have that time, and people who are more reserved are able to reach out in between in ways to get the information. I like the 30-minute pieces.
Yeah, I do too.
And I like that do it on multiple days thing, Irene. There used to be a
Yeah.
conference called what was it, Mike, in the Northeast?
ComSense.
ComSense. And you would go, it was a 3-day event. And the first 2 days, the mornings you did with the same person. So it's almost like picking a pre-conference. And so you had half of that information and on one day and then half on the information on the other day. And the rest of the days were 1 hour sessions. So it was nice to see the Colorado conference went that way this year, where they had 2 half-day or 2 hours days. And then Closing the Gap did that with pre-conference, split it in half. And it's much easier to take longer amount of information when it's broken up that way.
There's a Canadian conference that does that too that I presented at, but I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah, I do like that idea,
Yeah.
though, right? I mean, how many times are you sitting in a session and an idea hits you and you kind of zone for a second and you're like, oh, like, how would I do that? What would that look like? I mean, zone in a good way, Cassie. I see you laughing at me, like in a good way. Like, oh, like, how could I use that? And it'd be nice to kind of process for a little bit, like Irene said, and pop back in.
I was just laughing that you said once during a session, Mike, because I think I do that like every 5 minutes in sessions, and I quick like jot a note or open something up. Only once?
And I also think that many of the folks who are there because they're having implementation issues.
Yes.
And this supports implementation a lot better.
Yeah, it's closer to a coaching model, Irene, right? It's like, take this little bit of information and then let's talk about how you will use this as you move forward and build some capacity in what you do. I mean, that's what I always like about the Ed Camp idea on Friday nights. If you spend all this time thinking about it, well, what the heck are you going to do with it? And the Ed Camp on Friday nights at the conference gives us that moment of, you know, I collected all of this kind of, in my mind, a little disconnected information because it was a little here and a little there. But then I come together on Friday and you think about it, by Friday, the conference is basically done normally. And so you're already in that mindset of, oh man, I'm about to go home. And someone's going to ask me next week what we're going to do with this info and what am I going to say? And so you have to start kind of pulling it together. And I think those kind of conversations, Irene, can have real value. And it's a shame that some people don't see those as important kinds of conversations. To me, they're the most important conversations. I don't want to hear about more apps. Well, I'll hear about more apps, that's fine. But I want to hear about how you're using those apps and how those might better support the people I work with. That's what I want to hear. And it's back to that implementation piece.
Or how you got the people you work with to use those apps.
Exactly, right. Yeah, the service piece of it, right? Not the tool piece, but the service piece.
Yeah.
Mike, I will tell you one thing I think we lost on, and I really like the Ed Camp thing on Friday night. But the one thing that I think didn't translate as well, and it is about the extra time being lost, right? The spare outside time.
Yeah.
The one thing I didn't get was with the exception of Veronica with 4 eyes,
Mhm.
which I only remember because of the nickname, I don't think I got any new contacts. Like every other year, I got a business card or a note that I needed to follow up with somebody. I think that was the one thing that wasn't the same this year at the Ed Camp. Maybe something we can actually look at trying to facilitate next year. Because I'll never forget, we met Vicky Haydix. We met a few people early on at the Ed Camps that totally changed, how Lori was doing her classroom. Because of the follow-up conversations. And I'm
Well,
not sure
and we
that
have all that contact info because they all registered through Eventbrite. We just didn't do anything with it in terms of like share your community, with the exception
and
of
I think
like pushing people towards like add your Twitter handle to our list kind of thing for networking.
that's all gone into a central place though, right? There wasn't the one-on-one I now know Mike,
Yeah.
right? And I think the only reason that I did that with Veronica, who's a advocate for low vision folks, is that she happened to be in 3 of the sessions, right? And so we ended up, if you do that 3 times, you're going to eventually say, oh yeah, I should probably remember this one, right?
Exactly.
But I do think that's just some feedback that we should probably take, right?
Yeah. And I think it goes back to, Bill, it's the same issue with interactions that you mentioned about the booth.
Right.
Because that could have happened while you would have been standing next to Veronica looking at the session board.
Looking at the board. We'd be looking at the
Exactly.
board.
It would have been a
Right, exactly
conversation.
right.
Yeah.
It's the same issue classroom teachers are having too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're
absolutely.
setting up like social hours with breakout rooms and open times for kids to be able to come in and communicate and connect to kind of take care of some of the SEL problems that are occurring. I don't know why a conference couldn't have something that had that kind of Friday night,
And
the night of thing.
I think that was their attempt with the social hour.
so, too.
Mike, maybe you can tell me if that was different because I'm not part of their little planning.
I agree.
But like, I don't know that came off as well as they were intending, if that was their intention.
Well, it was trying to replicate that running into people and that sharing conversation. But, like Bill mentioned and everybody else mentioned, you can only do that so much. Look, right now, there's 3, 6, 9, 10 of us on the video, and yet we're only having one conversation right now. If the 10 of us were in person, we might be having 3 different conversations in the same space, but we might be having 3 different discussions. And without breakouts, like Irene said, you can't really replicate that in the large group.
Right. Mike, Amy asked a good question in the chat. How do we feel as presenters about attendees sharing conference materials with non-attendees? I know this might be a no-no, but it's been a huge help in building capacity among people who couldn't attend.
Well, it's so funny. Irene, what do you think? And then I'll share.
I think it's great. And I usually ask people if that's going to be okay if I'm using their materials. Because I do a newsletter for our district, and I put in all kinds of materials that I find. And it's, as far as capacity building in our district, it's made a huge difference. And when I present, I put a disclaimer on saying, I have no original thoughts. Anything I put in here is probably something I got from somewhere on the internet. I tried to give everybody credit. If I missed somebody, I am deeply sorry.
And I think that's what it comes down to is not so much did my materials get used, but do I see them show up someplace else in somebody else's presentation without some kind of indication that it was like a riff off of my presentation or my presentation slide. I think that's the part where I get kind of, I'm like, I want everybody to have everything. Like, that's why, I mean, I know we've gone back and forth. I've talked to Mike and some others about sharing Google slide decks versus sharing a PDF or putting copyright. Like, how do we manage all that? And I think my thing is like giving credit versus, giving credit where credit is due versus like just somebody taking that and presenting it as their own work, which I don't think, Amy, that was what you were asking about at all. But
right. I was thinking of like something is well articulated in the slides, and I just share the slide deck with like one colleague or a small group. And in my experience, that created this huge cross district initiative. And it was so cool that like just this little seed from one presentation at ATIA. But I know that there are rules and I want to be respectful. So I tend to be kind of an information sponge and then love to share just like all of you. So I've just been trying to navigate that.
Ellie, do you know what ATIA's policy is?
I'm trying to remember what ATIA says. I know that closing the gaps is it has to stay within closing the gap registrants.
Right.
But ATIA, I'll have to go back and look. You know, we all sign these kinds of things and we don't always read all the stuff that we agree to.
I do now.
ATIA used to publish the slide decks to anyone. I don't think you had to be a conference attendee. You could get on the website for like a couple month period and just look at all the handouts, which is what I did before I could afford to go to the conference.
Yeah, and I think especially now that they've wrapped it in their own LMS, that's not the case because you have to be signed in to do it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that changes what their policy is.
Yeah, I'll have to go look.
Yeah,
Thing said.
Interesting. I go back and forth on this, and Alyssa and I did have this conversation, a deep conversation about this, because I'm one of those people who've seen my stuff show up in its exact format it was in, just kind of snapshotted and dropped on another slide, but it is my slide dropped on another slide. And I've seen that, and it, in a webinar, I'm like, oh, whoa, wait a second, okay. And luckily I'm soft-spoken and I will not confrontational, and I wouldn't put that in the chat window to the presenter as a direct message. I wouldn't do that. Maybe some of you would. No, I would. That's what I would do.
This looks.
So I am very aware of that, and like I said to Alyssa, I'm one of those now, and I put my name on every slide. And I embed it in different spots on the slide. I drop it into pictures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mike, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but this is concerning, like the stealing of intellectual property, because we all work really, really hard at what we present. And I have always been very, very giving with, I just want this to go back into the hands of the kids. And I want this to affect people and take. But yeah, when you see your stuff show up somewhere else, that's your intellectual property. So what is there a protocol? Like, what would you guys do if you were sitting in a presentation, like Mike said, and saw your stuff?
And that's part of what prompted this conversation probably a year ago when I reached out to Mike, was like, okay, it feels weird to brand my slides. Like that felt kind of icky to me. And yet at the same time, like I see Kelly going, no, it shouldn't have. Like that's what I started to do, was go into the slide master, and on a couple different slides, maybe not every page, but like a couple different slide masters, put in either my name and my Twitter handle or something that made it very obvious. Because if you just put it in as a caption on the slide, they just click delete and it's gone. But if I put in a slide master, like it's a little harder for people to figure out how to do it. I think that's been my like workaround, because I'm like you, Rachel, like I want people to just have it. If it helps one person to be able to connect, like with the social media, with our PLN, we wanted people to just be able to do what we wanted them to do. But yeah, it's disconcerting to see a portion of something you did show up someplace else. And I haven't found the happy medium yet, I don't think even.
Well, even the harder part, Lisa, that I was just thinking about the fact that sometimes it is your direct slide, but sometimes it's the order that you did things and the video that you started and ended and the comments that you made during it that you hear. And I understand, like, we are learning from each other. So there's a part of that, but I don't know. I'm somebody who would probably stew and gripe about it at AT Town Hall more than I would address it. But I do think that it's something that we need to really think about, because I feel protective of my people who, you see their stuff going around, and you want to address it. I don't know.
It happened to me where I was sitting in a presentation and my whole slide presentation was being shown without any, like everything stripped off of where it had come from. And even like the people that I acknowledge on my slide stripped off of it. And so, I stewed the whole presentation, went up to the presenter at the lunch break and said, so that's my slides. She had no idea she had gotten them off of Pinterest.
Oh, Pinterest.
That's why I do the disclaimer, is because there's things that you find that are good and you want to use. I mean, I try to reshape a slide, so it's more original, but it's still the intellectual property. Right. So that's why I try to always put in that disclaimer. I'm not trying to steal anybody's stuff. And then I also tend to go to Cite Me, and so that people can go and click on it and get to the exact original throughout the deck.
But
You
that's
just
the
think-
thing. I think it's about giving credit where credit is due. And that's like Rachel put that in the chat too. Like that's the piece of it, is that there's people that are out there. And even this person, you know, Kelly, that took your slide, like, all right, she was unaware. So, I mean, you know, but it was good that you addressed it. It was taken head on. And now she realizes like, maybe I need to be a little bit more careful about what I'm pulling off of the internet, you know, and trying to find the resources and the source of where it came from. But I think that there are some people who are just blatantly like doing that too. And, you know, that's unnerving.
Yeah, I don't want it to get to a place where what I feel like is as a presenter that like I want to give them a locked PDF and only if you ask for an accessible version. Like I don't want it to get to that place because that feels icky to me too. Like
it's the balance of giving them something, going back to Amy's original question, which was not about stealing people's stuff, but about sharing people's stuff. Yeah, I'm okay with that too. And that's why I put my slides out there. And that's why I give you a link to my slides. I'm okay with you looking at the slides. There's that 1 minute when it flips over and then it's suddenly not so okay anymore. And you know,
And Mike, the time when it flips over is when the ownership is changed, right? So outside of conferences for a minute, we do a ton of work where we make guidelines, we make software, we make literally we make boards, right? And all of them we put under Creative Commons. And the one we chose was Creative Commons share alike with commercial adaptations, which means you can do whatever you want with this. If you want to sell it, you can do it. If you want to talk about it, if you want to modify it and reproduce it and everything else, you just can't claim that you created it, right? You have to start with attribution, meaning as long as you're saying where this came from, we're good. Now, other people can choose slightly different versions of that, but it really is, it's not about whether or not you're sharing the fact that Mike Murata gave this awesome presentation. You should see it. It's, oh man, Mike Murata gave a great presentation. I could do that. I'm going to give Mike Murata's great presentation and never mention the fact that it was his. Right? Not that there ever is such a thing as a great Mike Murata presentation.
Wow, that took a turn all of a sudden. I was all happy with myself. But, you know,
that really is where that difference is. What does bother me a little, and where it might come back closer, Amy, to what you were asking about, right, is what ownership do the conferences have?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Like as the venue, right? Can they limit the distribution of my stuff? If I want to share it, right? If I want to share this out, can the venue have a limitation on that? I'll tell you, we bounced off of that on this one because they had this completely useless thing called product showcase, where nobody went to them, and people, if you went to them, you got to see a demonstration of a product, and we knew going in that wasn't going to be worthwhile. So we went and grabbed smart people like Alyssa and Caroline Musselwhite and Jane Odom and Brian Whitmer. We got our cool friends to come on during that hour, and we also pushed it out live to Facebook and YouTube. And there was some question there about, can we do that? Can we take our ATIA session and also push it out on YouTube and Facebook? Since we were using our Zoom session and our Zoom license, we decided, hell yes, we can. Okay. If that wasn't the case, it might have been a very different question, right? So there are other edges of this question. But I think as far as the thing that seems to get more people upset, it's taking credit for their ideas, not expanding the visibility of their ideas.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I never have a problem with someone taking something and making it larger or spreading it wider. I think that's great. I think the concern is, I'll go back to the one webinar that I saw one of my slides in. That was a paid webinar.
Right.
That person got paid for that webinar.
Right.
That person used my slide and then got paid for it. That's not cool. That's not good. And it's the same thing with conferences. And I've had these discussions with ATIA in the past. I won't sign one of those things that says, we're going to turn around and sell your content for the next 6 months. I just won't sign that, because I sell my content as an independent consultant, and Kelly does too. That's what we do. You hire me to do something. If you give it to somebody, then I don't get to do it. And so there's this weird kind of balance there.
It is
Seems
a hard
like
balance.
the-
There's some with some bigger sessions that I've done for states that I just give them the rights to show it to people who log in within
Right.
their own state.
Yeah.
But outside of that, because that, I'm done.
Yeah.
But I get more concerned about people that try to limit me with whatever I might be creating for them
Mhm.
is only used by them and I can't use that again.
Yeah.
Those are always the lines and contracts that I'm crossing out.
Yeah,
Agreed.
absolutely.
Agreed. But we took a dark turn here at the end. I like that. That was fun.
Important. I don't think
We still
dark
haven't
is
seen your
needed.
slides,
It's
Mike.
necessary.
If you want to know, this question was on the slide because Alyssa and I talked about it recently again. And so I put this on as a conversation. So maybe I'll hold these for another town hall and we'll do this again.
Yeah.
As part of, who said, do I really?
I believe he really has
Cassie, how dare
slides.
you? I was ready to
Now
let you guys go, but now, Cassie, how dare you? How dare
Now,
you?
whether he
Well, I mean, we've been
created
hearing
them-
about them the entire time, but
yeah,
Yeah,
whether
he
he
just
created
made them. He
yeah,
was just
during
making
the
them while we were
session is a
sitting
whole
here.
different thing. There's no
How dare you?
timestamp. We'd have to go back and see the actual revision edits to see was it done, during the session or
it does
Look
have
at
a
it.
date on it. I mean, that's
It
something.
has a date on it. They're already sitting there all
Last
done.
added an hour ago at the top. Last
Yes.
added an hour ago, Mike. You made it.
I will
Before
accept the
noon.
apology for all of you. I'd like this to be an apology tour for the last minute, and I'll decide whether I accept your apologies or not.
Now I just want to know why you didn't prepare for mine.
this is the content I come
I
here
felt
for.
like we could fill an hour, Bill. We didn't need to. All right. Any other last thoughts before we head out to the real work of the day?
Yeah, no, back to reality.
Yep. No, I hear you. Next week, I was gonna hold off because I think most people are probably off. It's like a holiday.
Mhm.
So we'll pass on next week. We'll come back to it the following Monday, which is the 22nd. All right. All right, guys. Well, have yourself a good week and keep the conversation going. We'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.
All right,
Bye.
See you later.